The genetic code of hair and human evolution, a global history written in strands. Hello everyone, welcome to Deep Sight. I'm Lawrence. This week I got a very stylish haircut. Looking in the mirror and observing the people around me. Have you ever thought about the history of hair and civilization? Before we officially begin, let me ask you a question. How much money will you spend on your hair in your lifetime? Factoring in shampoo, conditioner, hair dryers, hair gel, wax, perms, dyes, cuts, extensions, transplants. Some rough estimates suggest that an average person spends anywhere from tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands or even $1 million on their hair. Why? Because we love our hair so much. What is hair actually for? Physiologically, it protects our brain from direct sunlight and physical impact, keeps us warm in winter, and insulates against heat in summer. It seems so simple, yet it is a vital component of human civilization. Aesthetically, it is the only accessory on our body that we can cut, color, and style at will. Changing your hairstyle is like changing your face. Our love for hair is practically written in our genes. We get anxious about hair loss, worried about graying hair, and a bad haircut can ruin our mood for days. Throughout history, hair has been a symbol of identity, status, charm, and even power. So, have you ever wondered why some people are born with black hair, others blonde, and still others red? Why do some have straight hair, others curly, some thick and coarse, others fine and thin? What evolutionary stories lie behind these differences? As a child, I got very excited watching cartoons with blue-haired and green-haired little characters. But do you know why there are no naturally blue-haired or green-haired people in the world? Is hair dye actually harmful to the body? And what about the saying, brunette wisdom, dumb blonde, reckless redhead? Is there any scientific basis? How long does a single hair live? Does stress really make your hair fall out? In this episode, we'll start from hair and take you on a complete journey through human migration, adaptation, civilization, prejudice, tradition, and fashion. This is deep content. Let's begin. Part 1. Two pigments decide everything. We learned in physics that the three primary colors can mix to create any color. What about hair? Is it also a mixture of three colors? To understand hair color, we first need to understand a chemical principle. All natural human hair colors come from two types of pigment produced by melanocytes in hair follicles. The first is eumelanin, which is black-brown. The higher its concentration, the blacker the hair. The second is pheomelanin, which is red-yellow. The higher its concentration, the redder or more golden the hair. The overall ratio and distribution of these two pigments determine the entire range of colors from jet black, dark brown, light brown, golden, to red and ginger. And because there are only two pigments, it is impossible to produce the full spectrum of colors. What is the core gene controlling these traits? It's called the melanocortin-1 receptor, or MC1 are for short. There's an interesting story here. Around 2000, scientists in Iceland conducted a large-scale genetic study. They found that Icelanders had a high proportion of red hair, and tracing the cause led them to multiple mutation sites on the MC1R gene. To verify the function of this gene, researchers used mice. When they knocked out the MC1R gene in mice, the black mice turned golden yellow. See, from mice to humans, this hair color switch is remarkably conserved. When the MC1R gene works normally, eumelanin dominates, and hair is black or brown. When a recessive mutation occurs, pheomelanin is overproduced and red or blonde hair appears. This mechanism itself has no inherent superiority or inferiority, but different hair colors in different geographic environments do bring distinct survival advantages and costs. Part 2. Black and brown hair, humanity's default setting. Let's first look at the most common hair color, black. Black hair is the natural hair color of the vast majority of people worldwide, covering Asia, Africa, indigenous Americans, and Southern Europe. Its evolutionary advantage is very direct. High concentrations of eumelanin effectively absorb ultraviolet radiation, protecting the scalp from sunburn and preventing the breakdown of folate in the skin. Folate is crucial for fetal development. In the equatorial and mid-latitude regions with strong sunlight, black hair is absolutely dominant. Speaking of black hair, here's an interesting historical anecdote. The ancient Romans greatly admired black hair, considering it a symbol of dignity and rationality. Conquered peoples gradually accepted the idea that black hair was mainstream. Even those extraordinarily brilliant monarchs, regardless of their actual hair color, were depicted in statues and portraits with black hair. Rome's enemies, the Germanic peoples, were mostly blonde or red-haired. The Roman writer Tacitus, in his Germania, described the Germanic people in a somewhat contemptuous tone, saying they had barbaric red hair. So, hair color was already a label distinguishing civilization from barbarism back then. Speaking of Caesar, here's a particularly interesting story. Julius Caesar himself had dark hair, but it wasn't thick. He faced the most dreaded problem of middle-aged men, baldness. According to the book Daily Life in ancient Rome, Caesar combed his hair forward to cover his obvious bald spots. When the situation became so severe that only a few thin strands could cover his seemingly bare head, he used an even cleverer method. He applied lamp-black dye to his head, making people think from a distance that he still had black hair. Even more interestingly, Caesar's adopted son Octavian, later Augustus, was blonde, which caused quite a stir at the time. Brown hair is a mixture of eumelanin and pheomelanin. It is also widely distributed, including in Southern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, and the Americas. Brown hair combines the sun protection of dark hair with some of the vitamin D synthesis efficiency of light hair. In mid-latitudes, it can be considered the evolutionary, optimal solution. Socially, brown hair is often seen as reliable, natural, and not extreme, and it is highly accepted in the workplace. Part 3. Blonde and red hair, high-latitude sunlight strategies. When humans left Africa and migrated to high-latitude regions like Northern Europe, the situation fundamentally changed. Sunlight there became scarce and weak. At that point, dark skin and dark hair became disadvantages. They blocked the already scarce UV radiation, hindering vitamin D synthesis and leading to rickets, skeletal deformities, and reduced fertility. Thus, natural selection began to favor light phenotypes. Blonde hair originated from mutations in genes like MC1 that greatly reduce eumelanin. A light-colored scalp can use the weak UV rays more efficiently to synthesize vitamin D, which became a key survival advantage for Nordic populations. There's an interesting Norse myth. Thor, the god of thunder, had iconic red-gold hair, while Loki, the trickster god, often changed his hair color. The ancient Vikings greatly revered red-haired warriors, believing red hair symbolized battle courage. In fact, the proportion of red hair among Vikings was higher than in other parts of Europe, a result of natural selection. The same logic applies to red hair. Red-haired people have very pale skin and are more prone to sunburn, but at high latitudes, this cost was offset by the benefit of vitamin D synthesis. Red hair is most common in Northern and Western Europe, especially in Scotland and Ireland, where the proportion reaches 10 to 13%. There's a Scottish legend. King Macbeth of Scotland is said to have had red hair. Although Shakespeare made him a tragic figure, historical records suggest Macbeth was indeed a brave warrior. To this day, every August, Scotland and Ireland hold ginger parades, where thousands of redheads from around the world gather to celebrate their unique hair color. Of course, evolution always comes with costs. Blonde and red-haired people are highly sensitive to sunlight and have a significantly higher risk of melanoma and other skin cancers than dark-haired people. At equatorial latitudes, such mutations would be quickly eliminated by natural selection, which explains why light hair never became mainstream in Africa or Southeast Asia. Colors like flaxen and strawberry blonde, which lie between blonde and red, result from even subtler ratios of the two pigments. They are also caused by weak MC1R mutations and are common in Scotland, Ireland, and Scandinavia. The fashion world considers these among the most attractive hair colors, combining the brightness of blonde with the warmth of red. For example, Prince Harry's hair is often described as ginger rather than pure red. Part 4. The natural hair colors that don't exist. So, why are there no naturally blue-haired or green-haired people? The natural hair color spectrum of humans is actually very limited. Black, brown, blonde, red, gray, and white. That's it. Fantasy colors like blue, purple, and green have never appeared in nature. There are 3 reasons. First, we lack the genes for corresponding pigments. Human hair follicles can only produce eumelanin and pheomelanin. There is no enzyme system to directly synthesize blue or green pigments. Second, we lack the hardware for structural color. Some animals' blue or green feathers don't come from pigments, but from microscopic physical structures on the feather surface that refract light. This is called structural color. Human hair has an extremely simple structure and doesn't have this optical trick. Third, evolution never created a need for them. Even if physiologically possible, green hair would have had no survival value for early humans. Green camouflage wouldn't fool big cats, which are red-green colorblind. Blue hair at high latitudes wouldn't help synthesize vitamin D, wouldn't protect against sun, and would actually increase predation risk by standing out. So whenever you see any hair color other than black, brown, blonde, red, gray, or white, it is almost certainly the result of artificial dyeing. Here's a piece of trivia. Historically, some people tried to change hair color through diet. In the 16th century, Spanish colonists in South America discovered that indigenous people used a dye from the cochineal insect to color their hair red. But no matter how many of those insects they ate, their hair color didn't change because pigments can't enter the hair follicle through the digestive system. The modern claim that eating black sesame seeds can turn gray hair black also lacks scientific basis. Part 5. Hair texture, a dance of genes and environment. Besides color, hair texture is another important marker of ethnic differences. Why do some people have coarse, thick hair while others have fine, soft hair? Why are some naturally curly and others straight? There are evolutionary stories behind these traits as well. Hair diameter is largely determined by the size and shape of the hair follicle. East Asians typically have larger hair diameters, averaging 80 to 100 microns, with a round cross-section, making the hair coarse, stiff, and straight. People of African descent have slightly smaller diameters, but the cross-section is oval or flattened, and the follicles are curved, so hair is naturally curly. Because of the spiral structure, it appears denser and more voluminous. Europeans fall in between, with cross-sections ranging from round to oval, so they have everything from straight to wavy to curly, and hair thickness varies widely. The evolutionary advantage of curly hair is very clear in equatorial regions. Tight curls form a natural insulating layer. Air can flow between the curved strands, helping cool the head while also blocking direct sunlight. Straight hair at high latitudes lies flatter against the scalp, providing better insulation. This is like natural selection installing different models of radiators and insulation layers for people in different regions. Regarding hair length, growth rates don't differ much among ethnic groups, about 1 to 1.5 centimeters per month, but the growth phase, anagen, is typically longer in East Asians, 5 to 7 years, so in theory, hair can grow over 1 meter long. For Europeans, the anagen phase is about 3 to 5 years, for Africans, about 2 to 4 years. That's why extremely long hair is rare among people of African descent. It's not that it won't grow, but the follicle's working life is shorter. Hair thickness also affects our perception of hair volume. One thick hair occupies the same space as 2 fine hairs, so even with the same number of follicles, people with thick hair appear to have more volume. This is why East Asians, despite having coarse hair, often give the impression of good hair quality and plenty of volume. After discussing thickness and curliness, you might ask, among different ethnicities and hair colors, what's the total number of hairs on the head? Who has the most? Who has the least? This is an interesting question, and the answer might differ from what you guess. First, a typical average. A healthy adult has about 80,000 to 120,000 hairs on the scalp. But this isn't absolute. Blondes have the highest average, reaching 140,000 to 150,000. Brown and black hair come in at about 100,000 to 110,000. Redheads have the fewest, around 90,000. You might find this surprising. Don't blondes seem to have a lot of hair? Yes, but blonde strands are very fine. So even with more hairs, the overall volume may not surpass coarse, black hair. Conversely, redheads have the fewest hairs, but their strands are usually the thickest. One red hair can do the work of 2, so they don't look thin. Simply put, it's like covering a plate with ropes of different thicknesses. Thicker ropes require fewer strands. Differences among ethnic groups are also clear. East Asians have the thickest hair, about 85 to 100 microns per strand, strong and structured, with about 200 to 300 follicles per square centimeter of scalp, totaling 80,000 to 120,000 hairs. Europeans have finer hair, 60 to 85 microns, but higher follicle density, 300 to 400 per square centimeter, bringing total hairs to 110,000 to 120,000. So Europeans often have a more voluminous overall head of hair. Africans have naturally curly hair with curved follicles, finer strand diameters, and the lowest density. Total hairs about 60,000 to 90,000. However, their curls form a fluffy insulating layer on the scalp, so it doesn't look sparse. So, how much or little hair you have depends not just on strand count, but also on thickness, curliness, and follicle density. Your hair volume is largely set by genetics from birth, but stress, nutrition, and age can quietly affect it later. For example, after age 30, follicles gradually shrink, and after 50, you might lose 10,000 to 20,000 hairs per decade. That's why hair gets thinner with age. Now let's look at the life code of hair itself. No matter whether your hair is black, blonde, red, straight, curly, thick, or fine, it grows on your own scalp. So how exactly does hair grow? Why does it fall out? How long does one hair live? First, consider the production base, the hair follicle. Located beneath the scalp, a follicle is like a tiny factory that constantly produces new hair. Hair is mostly protein, accounting for 60 to 95% of its composition, like little ropes woven from protein. The human body has about 5 million hairs in total. About 100,000 of them are on the head. But these 100,000 hairs don't all grow synchronously. Follicles go through a very precise life cycle that repeats continuously. That cycle has 3 phases. The first is the anagen, growth, phase, hair's adolescence. During this phase, the follicle continuously produces new cells, and the hair grows at about 0.3 millimeters per day. The anagen phase lasts about 2 to 8 years. The longer it lasts, the longer the hair grows. At any given time, about 85 to 90% of hair is in the anagen phase. Because the vast majority of hairs are hard at work, our hair seems to keep getting longer. The second is the catagen transition phase, the retirement notice period. Here, the follicle shrinks and hair stops growing. This phase lasts only 2 to 3 weeks, and only about 1% of hair is in this stage. The third is the telogen resting phase, hair's vacation. In this phase, the old hair is fully keratinized, no longer absorbs nutrients, and the follicle rests for about 3 months. After that, the old hair falls out naturally, and the follicle re-enters the anagen phase, producing an entirely new hair. About 10 to 15% of hair is in the telogen phase. Based on this cycle, the natural lifespan of a single hair is about 2 to 7 years, specifically, about 2 to 4 years for men and 3 to 6 years for women. That means that one strand of hair on your head today may have been with you for 3 or 4 years, or even longer. Therefore, losing some hair every day when combing or washing is completely normal. A healthy adult sheds about 50 to 100 hairs per day, while an equal number of new hairs quietly grow. Daily metabolism naturally causes about 1% of telogen phase hairs to shed. Only if shedding consistently exceeds 100 hairs per day, or if overall volume visibly decreases, should you be concerned about abnormal hair loss. Does stress really cause hair loss? Yes, it can. Among the many types of hair loss, one of the most common is telogen effluvium, where a large number of hairs prematurely enter the telogen phase due to some stressor and shed in a cluster. Many factors can trigger telogen effluvium: drastic hormonal changes after childbirth, major surgery, serious illness, rapid weight loss, malnutrition, high psychological stress. All these can disrupt the normal hair cycle and cause many hairs to leave early. The good news is that telogen effluvium is usually reversible. Once the stressor disappears and the body returns to normal, the follicles restart the growth cycle, and hair slowly grows back over a few months. For example, women with postpartum hair loss usually recover their pre-pregnancy hair volume within 6 months to a year. Of course, some types of hair loss cannot recover on their own, such as the most common form, androgenetic alopecia, male pattern baldness. This is caused by genetic predisposition combined with the action of a testosterone metabolite called DHT, which causes the follicles to shrink, become thinner, and eventually stop producing hair. Statistics show that about 30% of men over 30 suffer from androgenetic alopecia. Women can also be affected, but usually with milder symptoms. Hair is special. Have you noticed another amazing thing about it? Why does your hair keep growing and growing, while your body hair does not keep getting longer? That's a very clever question, touching on a core mystery in human evolutionary and developmental biology. The simple answer is that hair doesn't stop growing like body hair because it has a much longer growth phase, anagen, programmed by its genes, not because of an active length sensor. In fact, most mammals' hair does work like that. For example, cats, dogs, gorillas, their hair grows to a certain length, then stops, falls out, and new hair grows to about the same length. That's because their anagen phase is very short, while the telogen phase is long. But human scalp hair is different. The The follicles on our head are programmed with an unusually long anagen phase, 2 to 8 years. During that time, hair grows continuously at about 0.3 to 0.4 millimeters per day, about 1 to 1.5 centimeters per month. Only when the anagen phase ends and the telogen phase begins does hair stop growing and eventually fall out. So, hair doesn't decide to grow long. It's that the follicle keeps producing until it receives a stop work order from the genes. So why did evolution make human hair keep growing? There are several hypotheses, none proven. First, sexual selection and display. Healthy hair may have been an honest signal of health in human evolution. Growing hair very long requires good nutrition and proper endocrine function. So long hair, like a peacock's tail, advertises, "I'm strong, well-nourished, and parasite-free." Second, balance of cooling and sun protection. After humans became upright, the top of the head was directly exposed to the sun. Long hair can both block UV radiation and allow air circulation to help cool the head. Third, warmth and social grooming. In cold regions, long hair provides extra neck warmth. And in human evolution, mutual grooming, picking through each other's hair, was an important social bonding behavior. Another key point, hair length is actually self-limiting. Although the anagen phase is long, it does eventually end. Suppose your anagen phase is 4 years and your hair grows 1.2 centimeters per month. Then your maximum length is about 57 centimeters before it falls out. That's why most people can't grow hair past their waist or hips. The anagen limit is reached, and new hairs haven't grown that long before shedding. So it's not truly infinite growth, just slow growth with a very long cycle. As for other body hair, eyebrows, eyelashes, vellus hair on arms, their anagen phase lasts only weeks or even days, so they stop at a few millimeters. Let's compare anagen lengths. Scalp hair, 2 to 8 years can reach tens of centimeters or over 1 meter. Beard hair, 1 to 2 months, usually only 1 to 2.5 centimeters. Rarely, some can exceed 10 centimeters. So those mythological ultra-long beards down to the ground, they don't exist. Eyebrows and eyelashes, about 30 days, so they stay a few millimeters long. Vellus hair on arms, about 30 days never becomes long hair. This is an evolutionary economy. Body hair doesn't need to be long. Too long would hinder heat dissipation or increase parasite risk. The continuous growing of scalp hair is a unique human trait compared to other primates. Our closest genetic relatives, chimpanzees, have the same short hair on their heads as on their bodies. So next time you get a haircut, think about this. Every inch you cut off is the result of that multi-year anagen timer in your genes quietly working for months. Part 6. Gray and white hair. Pigment factory shutdown and the truth behind overnight graying. As we age, the melanocytes in our hair follicles gradually age and diminish until they stop producing pigment altogether. Newly grown hair then appears gray, with a small amount of residual pigment, or white, no pigment at all. The first white hair typically appears between age 30 and 40, but individual variation is huge, influenced by genetics, autoimmune diseases, or chronic stress. Regarding white hair, the most famous legend is the overnight graying. In China, there's the story of Wu Zixu, who, while fleeing from the king of Chu, was so anxious crossing the Zhao Pass that his black hair turned white overnight. In the West, Marie Antoinette is often cited. The French queen, after being imprisoned with the royal family during the Revolution, reportedly had her hair turn completely white the night before she was guillotined. Hence, overnight graying is also called Marie Antoinette syndrome. Charles Dickens described similar scenes in A Tale of Two Cities. And in Chinese martial arts fiction, the character Lian Nishang from The Bride with white hair turns white overnight from heartbreak, becoming a classic image. But from a scientific perspective, can overnight graying actually happen? Once hair emerges from the follicle, it is already dead and cannot change color. However, modern research shows that stress does accelerate the graying process, just not literally overnight, but over weeks or months. The newly grown hairs come in white. A 2020 study published in Nature revealed the mechanism. When the body experiences severe stress, the sympathetic nervous system releases a chemical called norepinephrine, which directly acts on melanocyte stem cells in the hair follicle, causing those stem cells to be rapidly depleted and lose the ability to produce melanin. In other words, newly grown hairs have no pigment supply, so they are white. Even more fascinating, A 2025 study by a University of Tokyo team in Nature Cell Biology made a revolutionary discovery. The white hairs that grow under stress may actually be the body's self-rescue mechanism. The study found that when melanocyte stem cells suffer DNA damage, they can choose a senescence differentiation path. Although this leads to white hair, it simultaneously prevents those damaged cells from proliferating uncontrollably and turning into cancer. Stem cells that bypass this path may develop into melanoma. So, in a sense, white hair is the body's self-sacrifice to prevent cancer. The white hairs you get from stress might be your body shielding you from a cancer risk. Gray and white hair have historically been seen as symbols of wisdom and experience in both Eastern and Western cultures, such as the Chinese phrase, white hair and youthful complexion for healthy elders. The Book of Songs, classic of poetry, contains verses like temples like autumn frost, eyebrows like distant mountains, using white hair to symbolize the wise elder. In modern society, however, many people dye their hair to cover white and look younger. Interestingly, the silver hair fashion has emerged in recent years, with many young people actively dyeing their hair silver gray, giving white hair a new aesthetic meaning. Granny gray once became one of the hottest hair colors, with Pinterest searches skyrocketing 879% in 1 year. And the term silver fox is a sexy compliment for gray-haired men in the West. Even Elon Musk's mother, May Musk, at 71, has become a fashion icon with her silver hair. From a sign of aging to a personal statement, the meaning of white hair is being redefined. Part 7. Hair color as cultural symbol, prejudice, power, and the truth behind dumb blonde. Hair color is not just a biological trait. It is also a projection of social history. Red hair suffered a long stigma in history. In medieval Europe, red hair was associated with Judas the traitor. During the witch hunts, red-haired women were accused of being witches and persecuted. This prejudice had multiple sources. Red hair was often linked to the Celts, who were conquered peoples. The Vikings who raided Europe had many redheads, leaving an impression of barbarism. Even in modern times, red-haired children are often bullied at school, called ginger or carrot top. Yet red hair has also left glorious marks in history. Let's look at famous red-haired figures. Eric the Red, the Viking who is said to have discovered Greenland. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of medieval Europe, reportedly had red hair. And England's Tudor dynasty, from Henry VIII to his daughter Elizabeth I, the Tudors were known for red hair. Elizabeth I, in particular, ascended the throne at age 25 with a pale face, bright eyes, and thick red hair. This virgin queen, who ushered in England's golden age, used her red hair as a signature, recorded in countless portraits. In an era when red hair was widely discriminated against, Elizabeth I used her red hair to craft a unique queenly image. With her splendid clothes and meticulously styled red locks, she declared to all of Europe that a red-haired woman could rule England's golden age. Then there is Frederick I of Germany, nicknamed Red Beard, Barbarossa in Italian. The 12th century Holy Roman Emperor had a red beard. The Italians, because of his bloody suppression of the Lombard League, called him Frederick the Red-Bearded Tyrant. Later, Hitler greatly admired him and named the invasion plan of the Soviet Union Operation Barbarossa. So red hair in history is a mix of glory and stigma, full of contradictory colors. Times have changed. Only 1 to 2% of the world's population is naturally red-haired, making it a scarce resource. The fashion industry has begun actively seeking red-haired models. The combination of fair skin, freckles, and red hair is highly distinctive and used by top brands to create unique images. The Redhead Days Festival in the Netherlands has become a proud gathering for redheads worldwide. The story of blonde hair is even more complex. From the late 19th century to the first half of the 20th century, German philosophers and anthropologists idealized blonde hair and blue eyes as the Aryan ideal. Nazi Germany radicalized this racial myth, using blonde hair as a marker of the master race, leading to great historical tragedy. After World War II, Hollywood created the dumb blonde stereotype. Blonde women were often portrayed as naive, shallow, and sexy. Marilyn Monroe pushed this image to its peak, making blonde hair simultaneously carry the contradictory labels of attractive and not to be taken seriously. Studies also show that blonde women may face discrimination in job hiring and promotion, being perceived as less intelligent than darker-haired women. So where did the dumb blonde stereotype actually come from? It didn't form overnight, but accumulated over more than 2 centuries. The Western fascination with blonde hair long predates the dumb label. As early as ancient Greece, the goddess of love Aphrodite was imagined by artists as a blonde with an alluring aura. By the Roman Empire period, after the Romans conquered the tall, formidable blonde Celtic tribes, they developed a complex sense of inferiority. A craze for dyeing hair blonde swept the city. But the Romans' attitude toward blonde hair was actually ambivalent. On one hand, they admired its beauty. On the other, they looked down on those who dyed their hair blonde just to follow fashion. The dumb blonde stereotype truly took shape in mid-18th century France. A woman named Rosalie de appeared. She used her beauty to become a wealthy man's mistress and enter high society, but she developed a habit of pausing for long periods while speaking, appearing clumsy and slow. In 1775, her image was incorporated into a French satirical comedy as a silent, dull-witted dumb blonde. This is considered the first mocking prototype of the dumb blonde. In the late 19th century, the label crossed the Atlantic to the United States. In 1868, a British comedy troupe performed in New York, and 4 blonde women danced in tight costumes to entertain the audience. They were widely seen as stupid, women who only used their bodies to please. In 1889, the Kansas Times-Star reported, many local pastors warned their congregations last night to boycott a group of dumb blondes who will perform at the local theater. In the 20th century, the rise of the film industry seared the image of the dumb blonde beauty into the public's DNA. In 1921, Gloria Swanson played a foolish, naive blonde in the silent film The Affair of Anatole, which was a huge success. Filmmakers quickly realized that filming sexy blondes made money more easily than telling serious stories. By the 1950s, Marilyn Monroe burst onto the scene. Her iconic scene in The 7-Year Itch with her skirt blown up by the subway grate, and her gold-digging, naive, yet sexy role in Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, pushed the dumb blonde stereotype to its peak. But scientific research has concluded the opposite. This is a completely unfounded prejudice. A nationwide study by Ohio State University analyzed tens of thousands of white American women and found that natural blondes had an average IQ of 103.2, compared to 102.7 for brown-haired, 101.2 for red-haired, and 100.5 for black-haired women. Not only were blondes not less intelligent, but their average IQ was actually slightly higher than other hair colors. Professor Zagorski, who led the study, said, "The dumb blonde stereotype is completely wrong. Research shows that any intelligence-based discrimination against blondes should not exist." Even more interesting, the study found that blondes had a higher proportion in the highest IQ category than other hair colors, and a lower proportion in the lowest IQ category. However, the researchers cautiously noted that this does not mean there is a direct link between blonde genes and high IQ. One possible explanation is that blonde women grew up in family environments with more reading materials and more intellectual stimulation. In other words, it's not that being blonde makes you smarter, but that social background and cultural environments differ. A study by Coventry University also demonstrated the absurdity of this prejudice. The researchers had 120 men and women observe models wearing 4 different wigs: platinum, natural blonde, brown, and red. The results showed that respondents consistently perceived the platinum blonde wigs as looking the stupidest, while natural blonde wigs were rated as the most popular. The study also found that natural blondes were not labeled stupid, but received the highest popularity scores. So what real-world consequences does this prejudice have? Workplace surveys show that blonde women are more likely to be underestimated, often assigned to appearance-oriented roles in job applications, and face invisible barriers to promotion and pay. Some blonde women have complained, "After I dyed my hair black, people suddenly took me more seriously." A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology also found that men's brain responses were relatively sluggish when facing blonde women, because subconsciously they believed these women were less intelligent and not worth taking seriously. Thus, the greatest harm of prejudice often lies not in its targets, but in revealing the shallowness of those who hold the prejudice. Black hair has taken a completely different path. In Western culture, black hair has long been associated with seriousness, professionalism, reliability, and intelligence. In job interviews, especially in traditional industries like finance and law, people with dark hair are more likely to be evaluated as steady and experienced. In Asian culture, black hair is synonymous with health, youth, and nature, never subjected to negative interpretations. This low-key quality instead conveys an inner sense of confidence and authority. Let's look at a great black-haired figure, Abraham Lincoln. Lincoln had black hair and wise blue eyes. As president, he signed and issued the famous Emancipation Proclamation, preserved the Union, and abolished slavery. Interestingly, the enormous stress of the Civil War also left marks on Lincoln's hair. His white hair increased dramatically in just a few years. The increasingly gray-white sideburns of this great president stand as powerful testimony to the weight of carrying an entire nation's fate. Part 8. Hairstyle and Civilization, a history of power written on the head. Now, let's shift our focus from hair itself to how humans have treated their hair. Hairstyle has never been merely a matter of personal aesthetics. It is a projection of civilization, an outer garment of power, a flag of rebellion. Ancient Egypt, shaving for cleanliness, wigs for status. Along the Nile, the hot climate made Egyptians prefer to shave their heads, but that didn't mean they abandoned decoration. On the contrary, they invented the most sophisticated wigs in human history, woven from wool, plant fibers, and human hair, then set with beeswax. The pharaoh's wig was layered, symbolizing the rays of the sun god. Commoners wore smaller wigs and even exchanged wigs as gifts at social gatherings. The custom of shaving the head also originated from hygiene, to prevent lice. Interestingly, the ancient Egyptians also invented the earliest hair dye, using henna to color white hair a deep red. Ancient Greece and Rome, short hair for the free, long hair for barbarians. The Greeks valued reason and order. Men wore short hair, women wore long hair, but usually pinned up. Alexander the Great himself reportedly had dark curly hair. He ordered his soldiers to shave their beards and cut their hair short so enemies could not grab them in battle. The Romans inherited this tradition. Short hair was seen as a mark of a civilized citizen, while long hair was characteristic of barbarians like the Gauls and Germans. The Roman Emperor Hadrian, with his signature short curly hair, influenced men's hairstyles for centuries. Medieval Europe, religious restraints and nuns' headscarves. After the rise of Christianity, hair took on strong moral connotations. St. Paul said, "Long hair is a woman's glory." But nuns had to shave their heads and wear headscarves, symbolizing renunciation of worldly beauty. Ordinary women covered their hair with veils and scarves. Only unmarried maidens could wear their hair loose. Knights would cut a lock of hair before going to war and leave it with their beloved as a token. Nobles and royalty began to shave the top of the head, leaving only a ring of hair, the tonsure, to show piety to God. Renaissance and Baroque, wigs and the peak of power. In the 16th century, syphilis spread across Europe, causing massive hair loss. King Louis XIII of France began wearing a wig to cover his baldness. His son, the Sun King Louis XIV, took wigs to the extreme. Louis XIV was only 5 feet 4 inches, 1.63 meters, tall. He wore towering curly wigs up to 30 centimeters high, plus high heels, and called himself the Sun King. Soon, all European nobility rushed to imitate him. The bigger and cullier the wig, the higher the status. British judges still wear white wigs today, a relic of that era. China, body and hair, received from parents. In Chinese civilization, hair had sacred meaning. The classic of filial piety says, body, hair, and skin are received from parents and must not be injured. Adults did not cut their hair, they wore it in buns or braids. Cutting hair was a punishment for criminals. In Chinese history, when the last dynasty, the Qing, conquered China, they imposed the hair-cutting and clothing change policy, forcing Han Chinese men to shave the front of their heads and wear the queue, a long braid. This triggered fierce resistance. Keep your head and lose your hair, or keep your hair and lose your head. By the late Qing, the long braid hanging down the back became the symbol of the Chinese in Western eyes, but it was not mainstream traditional Chinese culture. After the 1911 revolution, cutting off the queue became the first act of declaring revolution. The French Revolution and romantic long hair. In the late 18th century, French aristocratic men and women were obsessed with towering wigs, sometimes reaching 1 meter high, decorated with fruits, flowers, even miniature sailboats. However, in the revolutionary storm, nobles were sent to the guillotine. The last act before the guillotine was often cutting off their long hair. Revolutionaries, in contrast, wore short hair, called the Jacobin haircut. In the 19th century Romantic period, artists and poets grew long curly hair, rebelling against industrial uniformity. Chopin and Liszt's long hair became a symbol of musical genius. The 20th century, revolutionary hairstyles and freedom. In the 1920s, the short bob haircut rose with jazz music. Conservatives cried, "Women cutting their hair is a moral collapse." In the 1960s, the Beatles' mop-top haircut drove global youth wild. In the 1970s, punks dyed their hair pink, purple, and shaved mohawks, declaring war on mainstream society. In the 1980s, Michael Jackson's Jerry curl and Madonna's blonde hair became pop icons. Every generation uses hairstyle to declare, "This is who I am, and I don't belong to anyone." So, hairstyle has never been just about looking good. It is the divinity of Egyptian pharaohs, the pride of Roman citizens, the piety of medieval nuns, the power of French kings, the filial piety of the Chinese, the declaration of revolutionaries, and the rebellion of youth. Your hairstyle today, whether long or short, curly or straight, stands on the shoulders of thousands of years of civilization. Part 9. Modern Hair Dye, Balancing Beauty and Risk. Today, more than one-third of women and a growing number of men choose to change their natural hair color. Hair dyes allow us to transcend evolutionary limits and have any color we desire, from silver gray to pinkish purple, from emerald green to electric blue. But hair dye is not completely harmless. Let's look at the potential risks. Short-term damage. Ingredients in permanent dyes like ammonia, hydrogen peroxide, and p-phenylenediamine, PPD, can cause scalp irritation and allergic reactions. Severe cases can lead to facial swelling and difficulty breathing. Dyes can also damage hair texture, leaving it dry and brittle. Long-term concerns. For occupationally exposed people, e.g., hairdressers, or women who use dark-colored permanent dyes frequently and over a long period, some studies have observed a slightly increased risk of bladder cancer and breast cancer. However, for ordinary users who dye their hair 2 to 4 times a year, there is currently no clear evidence of overall increased cancer risk. Individual differences also matter. People with allergies, pregnant women, especially in the first trimester, and those with scalp injuries need to be particularly cautious. So how can you minimize the damage from dyeing? Here are some practical tips. Patch test. 48 hours before each dyeing session, apply a small amount of mixed dye behind your ear or on your inner elbow. Limit frequency, no more than 2 or 3 times per year. Choose gentler products, e.g., ammonia-free or semi-permanent dyes. Don't wash your hair 1 or 2 days before dyeing. Natural scalp oils act as a protective barrier. Apply dye from the mid-shaft to ends, trying to avoid contact with the scalp. Rinse thoroughly after dyeing, and use color-safe shampoo and conditioner for maintenance. Beyond safety, many people care about, what color should I dye my hair? In fact, different skin tones and hair textures suit different shades. Warm skin tones harmonize with red, copper, or warm brown tones. Cool skin tones suit gray, ash blonde, or cool brown. In recent years, partial dyeing techniques like ear-length highlights, balayage, and ombre have become increasingly popular. They not only reduce the amount of dye contacting the scalp and hair, but also create layers and personality. Temporary coloring products like hair color sprays, waxes, and one-use dye pens are also chosen by many. They don't change the hair's internal structure, only coat the surface and wash out in one shampoo. Perfect for trying a new color occasionally. Finally, let's return to the question we started with. How much money will you spend on your hair in your lifetime? Perhaps you already have your answer. But however much you spend, remember this. Every strand of natural hair color is the product of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, with stories of wind, sunlight, and entire tribal migrations behind it. The shape of your hair, whether straight or curly, thick or thin, dense or sparse, is also a trace left by natural selection in different latitudes and climates. From Caesar dyeing his hair black to hide baldness, to Elizabeth I using red hair to craft a queenly image, to today where we can dye our hair any color we wish. Humanity's journey from passively adapting to nature to actively transforming ourselves is itself the most unique charm of our species. Alright, this extra-long episode on hair and human evolution, the hair cycle, cultural biases, and the money we spend ends here. If you enjoyed this comprehensive analysis covering genetics, history, and fashion, remember, by studying others, we can understand ourselves. By studying history, we can understand the rise and fall of nations. Let's all work for human civilization and peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and save. See you next time.